The day the fifth assistant quit, Eleanor Voss sat alone in the middle of her glass-walled office, staring at the closed door as if it had just confirmed the thing she feared most, that people could handle her success, her money, and her power, but not her vulnerability. Her wheelchair was positioned beside the enormous window overlooking the bright city streets, yet she barely noticed the sunlight. She had spent 3 years building one of the most successful technology companies in the country, but she could not find one person willing to stay beside her for more than a single day. Assistants had called her demanding, difficult, cold, and impossible. Some lasted 6 hours. One lasted until lunch. The fifth had walked out that morning after Eleanor dropped a folder from her lap and needed help picking it up. What none of them knew was that Eleanor wasn't angry because she needed help. She was angry because every time someone helped her, she could see the pity in their eyes. And on that bright Monday morning, when she believed she had finally run out of people to trust, a single father named Callum Reeves walked through her office door carrying a worn backpack, a stack of resumes, and a determination that would change both their lives. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share this story with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps our family bring more stories of courage and hope to our community. Callum was not the kind of person Eleanor expected to see applying for the position. He was 38, neatly dressed but clearly not wealthy, with tired eyes and a small scar above his eyebrow. His resume showed years of experience managing schedules, transportation, logistics, and customer service, but nothing about working for a powerful CEO who used a wheelchair. When Eleanor looked at him, she immediately noticed the children's drawing sticking out of his backpack. It showed a crooked blue house, a smiling stick figure holding a little girl's hand, and a bright yellow sun taking up half the page. Callum explained that his 9-year-old daughter, Maisie, had drawn it before school and told him he needed to keep it with him because it reminded him why he couldn't give up. Eleanor looked away quickly. She had learned not to let small things reach the places inside her that were still hurting. The job itself was simple on paper but brutal in reality. Eleanor needed someone who could organize her impossible schedule, coordinate transportation, manage meetings, handle confidential documents, and assist with practical tasks without treating her like she was fragile. She had fired 4 assistants in the previous month and watched 3 more resign before noon on their first days. Eleanor expected Callum to be another temporary employee. Instead, she told him plainly that the job was difficult, that she had little patience for mistakes, and that she didn't need someone who felt sorry for her. Callum listened carefully, then accepted the position without trying to impress her. That was the first thing Eleanor noticed. He didn't stare at her wheelchair. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't call her brave for simply entering her own office. He treated her exactly like a person who had a difficult job to do. By mid-morning, the first problem arrived. Eleanor's transportation service called to say the vehicle assigned to take her to an important meeting had broken down. Her meeting was less than an hour away, and canceling could cost the company millions. Eleanor's hands tightened around the arms of her wheelchair. She had seen this before. The assistant would panic, apologize, and tell her there was nothing they could do. Instead, Callum calmly began making calls. He contacted another transportation provider, checked the vehicle's accessibility specifications, confirmed the lift dimensions, rearranged the meeting location, and personally inspected the replacement vehicle before bringing it around. Eleanor watched from the window as Callum ran through the bright parking lot, checking everything twice. When he returned, he didn't announce his accomplishment. He simply placed the revised schedule on her desk and said the problem had been handled. The meeting went perfectly until Eleanor's presentation computer froze. Her executives stared at the screen while the investors waited. Eleanor's face became pale. The old fear returned, the fear that one small failure would make everyone see her as incapable. Before she could react, Callum stepped in. He connected a backup device, retrieved the presentation from a secure cloud folder, and had the screen working again within minutes. Eleanor delivered the presentation flawlessly. The company secured the investment. As everyone congratulated her afterward, Callum remained in the background, quietly gathering papers. Eleanor realized something uncomfortable. For the first time in years, someone had helped her without making her feel smaller. But the next day brought a much bigger challenge. Callum arrived early and found Eleanor struggling with a stack of documents that had slipped from her desk. She had already spent several minutes trying to retrieve one particular envelope that had fallen beneath a cabinet. Callum approached to help, but Eleanor immediately stopped him. Her voice was sharp because embarrassment had always disguised itself as anger. She told him she could handle it. Callum stepped back. He didn't argue. He didn't insist. He simply waited nearby until she asked for assistance. That small act confused Eleanor more than anything else. Most people either rushed to help her without permission or refused to help because they were afraid of offending her. Callum had somehow found the middle ground. Over the following weeks, Eleanor began noticing details about him. Callum always checked his phone during his lunch break because Maisie was at school and sometimes sent him photographs of her drawings. He kept a small grocery list folded inside his wallet. He repaired his own shoes instead of buying new ones. He knew exactly how much money remained in his bank account before payday. He never complained, but Eleanor could tell he was carrying a heavy burden. One afternoon, she discovered the reason when Maisie came to the office after school because her usual caregiver had cancelled. The little girl sat quietly in a waiting area, coloring on a notepad while Callum finished his work. Eleanor expected the situation to become chaotic. Instead, Maisie looked up at her wheelchair and asked if she could draw it. For some reason, Eleanor said yes. Maisie drew Eleanor sitting beside a large yellow sun, with Callum standing nearby and herself holding both their hands. Eleanor stared at the picture for a long moment. She hadn't realized how lonely she looked until a child who knew nothing about her past had drawn her surrounded by people. She asked Maisie why she had put the sun behind them. The girl simply said that everyone deserved to have some light behind them, even on difficult days. Eleanor smiled for the first time in front of someone at work. That smile became the beginning of a quiet friendship. Callum never forced Eleanor to talk about her accident, but one afternoon, after a difficult board meeting, she finally told him what had happened. 3 years earlier, Eleanor had been traveling home from a company retreat when another driver crossed the center line. She survived, but a spinal cord injury changed her life forever. Before the accident, she had been independent, athletic, and constantly moving. Afterward, she spent months learning how to transfer, maneuver, work, and live again. Her fiancé had left during rehabilitation, telling her that he loved the woman she had been but didn't know how to love the life she had now. Eleanor had never told anyone at the company the full story. She had built walls around herself so thick that even kindness sometimes felt like an invasion. Callum listened without interrupting. Then he told her about his own loss. His wife, Maisie's mother, had died from an illness 2 years earlier. Callum had spent months trying to be both parents while working enough hours to keep their home. He had learned to pack school lunches with one hand while answering work emails with the other. He had cried in grocery store aisles and in parked cars. He had made mistakes. He had lost jobs. He had sometimes wondered whether he was failing his daughter. But every morning, Maisie woke up and believed he was enough, so he kept trying. For the first time, Eleanor understood that strength did not mean having no weakness. Strength meant continuing while carrying it. Their relationship slowly changed the atmosphere of the office. Eleanor became less guarded. Callum became more confident. He began encouraging her to participate in meetings instead of allowing executives to speak over her. Eleanor, in turn, began helping Callum with practical problems in ways he had never expected. When she learned that his daughter needed a special educational program that his insurance didn't fully cover, she offered to help through the company's employee support fund. Callum initially refused, believing it would compromise their professional relationship. Eleanor told him it wasn't charity. It was the same kind of opportunity she had once needed when she was rebuilding her own life. Eventually, he accepted. Then came the day everything almost fell apart. A major investor arrived for an afternoon presentation. Eleanor had prepared for weeks. The meeting could determine whether her company would expand internationally or lose a critical opportunity. Minutes before the presentation, a confidential financial file disappeared from the secure system. The company's chief financial officer immediately blamed Callum because he had been the last person to access the office network. Security reviewed the access logs, and Callum's credentials appeared on the record. Eleanor's heart sank. Callum insisted he hadn't taken anything. He explained that he had accessed the system earlier to retrieve a transportation document, but he had never opened the financial folder. The executives demanded that Eleanor suspend him immediately. For the first time since he had started working there, Callum looked frightened. Not because he was afraid of losing the job, but because he knew what losing it would mean for Maisie. Eleanor faced a choice that reached far beyond business. The old Eleanor would have protected herself first. She would have trusted the evidence and removed the risk. But she remembered Callum waiting patiently while she struggled with fallen papers. She remembered him fixing problems without seeking praise. She remembered Maisie's yellow sun. Instead of firing him, Eleanor ordered a deeper investigation. Hours later, the truth emerged. The financial file had not been stolen by Callum. An executive who feared losing his position had used Callum's credentials after secretly obtaining access through a compromised terminal. He had tried to make Callum the scapegoat because he believed a single father with limited resources would be unable to defend himself. The board was stunned. Eleanor was furious. But what happened next surprised everyone. Callum did not demand revenge. He asked Eleanor to consider why the executive had felt desperate enough to betray the company. Eleanor listened. The man admitted that he had been hiding serious financial mistakes and feared his career was over. Eleanor could have destroyed him. Instead, she chose accountability without cruelty. She removed him from his position, required repayment for the losses, and allowed him to cooperate with investigators rather than humiliating him publicly. Callum watched her carefully afterward. Eleanor asked why he was looking at her that way. He told her that she had once believed people were either useful or useless, loyal or disloyal, strong or weak. Now she was learning that people could be broken and still deserve a chance to become better. Those words stayed with Eleanor. Months passed. Eleanor's company grew. Callum became more than an assistant. He became the person Eleanor trusted to challenge her when she was wrong. Maisie became a familiar presence in the office, filling quiet corners with drawings and laughter. Eleanor began participating in accessibility initiatives across the city, using her influence to help businesses understand that disability did not mean inability. She also started visiting rehabilitation centers, not as a wealthy CEO giving speeches, but as someone who understood the fear of rebuilding a life from nothing. One bright afternoon, Eleanor returned to her office after receiving an award for her work in accessibility. The trophy was beautiful, but she barely looked at it. Instead, she stared at the old drawing Maisie had made on Callum's first week. The paper was slightly worn now, but the yellow sun was still bright. Callum entered carrying another drawing. This one showed 3 people standing beneath an enormous sun. Eleanor was beside her wheelchair. Callum stood next to her. Maisie stood between them holding both their hands. Eleanor looked at it and suddenly realized that somewhere along the way, the office she had once considered a prison had become a place filled with people she loved. She asked Maisie why she had drawn 3 people instead of 2. Maisie smiled and explained that her father had once told her family could be made by love, not only by blood. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Callum looked at her, and for a moment neither of them needed to say anything. They both understood what had happened. He had walked into her office as a man desperate for work, carrying a child's drawing in his backpack. She had hired him because she thought he might last one day. Instead, he stayed long enough to remind her that needing help did not make her weak, that trust could be rebuilt, and that life after loss could still contain something beautiful. Eleanor eventually asked Callum what made him refuse to quit when everyone else had walked away. He looked at Maisie, then at Eleanor, and simply reminded her that quitting was easy when you believed the story was already over. Sometimes courage was nothing more than deciding to stay long enough to see what happened next. Eleanor smiled through her tears because she finally understood. She had spent 3 years believing the accident had taken her future away. But perhaps it had only taken away the future she had planned. The future she had found afterward was different, slower, more vulnerable, and infinitely more meaningful. Before the story ends, I want to ask you something. If you believe people can change, if you believe kindness can heal wounds we cannot see, and if you believe that sometimes the person who refuses to give up on us becomes the reason we learn not to give up on ourselves, leave a meaningful comment sharing which part of this story touched your heart the most. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. And remember, sometimes the person who walks into your life looking for a job is actually carrying something far more valuable. A reminder that you are still capable of being loved, still worthy of trust, and still allowed to begin again. Eleanor had once believed her wheelchair marked the end of her independence. Callum taught her that independence was not about doing everything alone. It was about having the courage to decide what kind of life you wanted, accepting help without shame, and giving others the same second chances you hoped someone would one day give you. And beneath the bright afternoon sun, surrounded by a little girl's drawings and the people she had once been afraid to trust, Eleanor finally stopped looking at everything she had lost and started seeing everything she still had.